Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Debbie, I read a lot of books, and today I have literally just finished listening to Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood. I have now discovered there is also a TV series of this. Was it Netflix possibly? I'm not sure, but I'm gonna have to, oh it actually says major Netflix series. It says it right under the book cover. So this is the TV tie-in edition. It's read by Sarah Gaydon and also has an afterword by Margaret Atwood herself at the very, very end of the book. So this is actually based on a real life thing that happened in Canada in the 1840s. And I'll just get straight in with that blurb and then talk to you about the combination of the fiction and the history. 16 years have passed since teenaged Grace was locked up for the cold-blooded murder of her employer, Thomas Kinnear, and his lover, Nancy Montgomery. Saved from the gallows where her alleged accomplice was hanged, Grace claims to have no memory of the event which changed her life forever. Dr. Simon Jordan is an expert in the field of amnesia. His objective is to unlock the dormant parts of Grace's mind and discover the truth behind one of the most enigmatic and notorious women of all time. Was Grace an unwitting accessory or a cold-blooded killer? So it's in fiction and historical fiction, and the duration of this one is 15 hours and 58 minutes. I did it on around 1.5 speed, 1 3/4 speed sometimes, because my brain just processes things really, really quickly. So yeah, I knew nothing about the historicalness of this before I went in. I was on a bit of a Margaret Atwood kick at the time, and I had just finished listening to the audiobook of The Handmaid's Tale, and I decided to go and reserve loads of Margaret Atwood stuff. So I do also have Oryx and Crake reserved, and then I'll probably go through that series. I'm intrigued to read more by Margaret Atwood. So yeah, because I didn't know about the historicalness of it, and because it's in Canadian history, so it wasn't anything that I ever actually learnt about. I went down a bit of a deep dive into looking up the real story of what is known about Grace Marks and her life, and leading up to the murders and the murders themselves. And yeah, she was accused with another worker at the household of killing her boss and the housekeeper that was having an affair with the man of the house. And it's so unreliable narrator because it feels really strange to be talking about something that is based on true story but also has fiction in there as well. I'm sure I have read another book that's kind of like that has the true elements but also has the fiction in there, because even in the afterword by Margaret Atwood at the end, she admits that a lot of it came from actual historical documents in regards to the trial and letters that were written, and then she kind of tried to fill in the gaps with what was most logical, and then added in the stuff that only she could make up. So yeah, but obviously you're hearing about a woman who nobody knows the real story really. It's primarily done from Grace's point of view. It's so much of her telling her story, so it's one of those things where obviously you know from history that nobody knows all the answers, and it's kind of employed in a way through having the narrative through Grace as well. And it's an interesting one to unpack, and I'm very interested in watching the TV series to see how that's portrayed. So yeah, she was accused of murdering her boss and the housekeeper with a man called James McDermott, who was also a servant in the house. And you basically get the full life story for her, because it's set while she's in prison and she's hired out to be a housekeeper while still in prison, and so you get the full life story from where she was born, and the psychiatrist, is he a psychiatrist, who's talking to her and trying to get this information out of her. You occasionally get chapters from him and other people talking about Grace, but it is primarily through Grace's point of view, looking back and trying to remember but not remembering, because she states that she has absolutely no memory of what actually happened on the day of the murders. And so there's a lot of things about looking at mental health and kind of the idea of like maybe split personalities and things, just things that were definitely ahead of its time for the time that this all happened, because nobody understood what was going on. And there's some parts of it that imply that there's a bit of guilt on Grace's part due to what happened to a friend of hers, but at the same time you also don't know if the friend actually existed or if it was something that she made up. And there's just, yeah, I'm very intrigued to watch the TV series to really kind of unpack it all, because I just think it's a very unique, I say unique, well, it is fairly unique to have the narrative of somebody who was a historical figure who kind of essentially disappeared and kind of went off grid essentially for the time, because after she was pardoned after being in prison for like 30 years, she went to New York, and then her name was changed and nobody knows what happened to her after that. So here's me kind of, as somebody who's very interested in like family history and that kind of thing, wondering if there is a way to figure out what happened to her. Is it possible to figure out from like the process of elimination, the people that she might have known, trying to figure out what her alias would have been when she moved to New York? So much of it I was just there thinking, why is it called Alias Grace? Because she used the name Mary to leave the country, which was from a friend that she had, which at the same time there's lots of question marks over whether they were actually friends or whether that was something that Grace made up. I was wondering if it had something to do with the fact that she did use somebody else's name to leave the country, and there was points when she, after the murders, that she took the housekeeper Nancy's clothes and was accused of being a bit quite heartless for wearing the dead girl's clothes in court. And there's just, there's so much stuff going through my brain right now, having literally just finished it. Like, I was listening to it while getting ready and painting nails and things, so I literally finished it like 2 minutes before turning on the camera. It's a very interesting place to be in, having just finished it and still trying to understand what I've just listened to. But yeah, I am very intrigued by the TV series that was made. And this was first published in 1996, so it would be interesting to see if there has been anything more into research about it all. But I think it's because a lot of people were very conflicted on whether Grace was actually active in the murders, or if she was just an accomplice, or it was more that she was just more a victim of the servant that actually did it. And on Wikipedia, when you look at it, it says the story fictionalises the notorious 1843 murders of Thomas Kinnear and his housekeeper Nancy Montgomery in Canada West, because it starts off with Grace having been in prison for 30 years, and she got sent down when she was, 16? She was young. The murders happened in 1843. Yeah, so she was like 15, 16 when the murders happened, because she was born in 1828, and then the murders happened in 1843. So yeah, she was like 15, 16 at the time of the murders, and then it was like 30 years later she was finally pardoned. I say finally because at the same time, like, we don't know if she did it. But it even says here that when James McDermott, the servant, he insisted that Grace was an evil genius who masterminded the double murder and then feigned a mental illness in order to avoid the gallows. As you get towards the end of the book and you're finding out more about her, and there's a point when she undergoes hypnotherapy, and that point, it took me a second to figure out what was going on, and it's just like, if her relationship with Mary was completely true, it seems that she harbours a lot of guilt over what happened with Mary, and so is it a case of guilt associated with a bit of trauma which led to her completely blanking the day of the murders? But the fact is, though, just because you don't remember it doesn't mean you're not guilty. There's just so many question marks over it all, and I'm kind of fascinated by it all now. Yeah, it's probably the most ridiculous trying to make sense of my ramblings in this video, because McDermott was hanged, and that was when he insisted that Grace was the evil genius mastermind. However, Grace commuted to life in prison, in which she served in the Kingston Penitentiary. There was a point where for just over a year she was committed to an asylum, and then she was later returned to the penitentiary. And then after almost 30 years of incarceration in 1872, she was then pardoned and moved to upstate New York, and after that she disappeared from the historical record. Yeah. there's me thinking, oh, I wonder if like you can do like process of elimination, trying to figure out like what happened to her when she moved to New York. But it's just like, I even know from my own family history that when somebody disappears off the census, they've disappeared off the census, and it could be really difficult to fill in the blanks after that. The only way for me to fill in some of the blanks was actually through a DNA test, where I was just like, oh, I can finally confirm that this person I am actually cousins with determined that the people who I thought this person's parents were actually are, because if they weren't, I would not be related to this guy. So, because it was established through a genealogy website that I was first cousins to this guy, so it's just like the only explanation is who this guy's parents were. It was a great grandfather who seemed to disappear off the face of the earth. It was one of those people that's just like, it looks like he may have faked his death and ended up in America. Based on how things are piecing together, and also the fact there is a census record in Illinois, of all places, where he confirms that his mother was French and his father was English, and that fits in with the parents of the person that I had in the UK, where I was able to confirm that his parents were actually a French woman and the English-Irish guy. So, yeah. This was a family that found it very difficult to determine if their kids were born in Ireland or in England or in France. This is what happens when you're researching the name McCartney in Liverpool and Ireland. There's my mum going, well, we could be related to Paul McCartney. It's just like, yeah, just like we could be related to Rihanna because we've got family in Barbados. Doesn't necessarily mean it's true. As I go off on a tangent about genealogy websites, but the fact that my mind went there and just thinking, oh, I wonder if, you know, it's possible to figure it out, but I know how difficult it can be, and the fact is that I'm sure there will be people out there whose job it is to do this kind of research, and if they haven't figured it out, there's no way little old me is going to figure it out, is there? But yeah, it was a fascinating story of a real-life murder mystery done from the point of view of one of the assumed killers. If you do like historical fiction, I definitely recommend this, especially as somebody who knew nothing about this. I'm sure this would be incredibly interesting for people who grew up in Canada learning about this woman. But yeah, to say that this real-life woman is obviously the subject of Alias Grace and the TV adaptation. And then there was also a stage adaptation of it as well in 2017 in Chicago. So that would be fascinating to see a play of it, especially considering the fact that so much of it is just Grace talking to the therapist and just talking about it. I imagine with the TV series and with being it on stage, they probably act out the historicalness of it, act out the history and kind of like replay it essentially, because in the book it feels very one-person narration because that's what it is. So yeah, I had my moments with it based on the fact that it is mostly told from Grace's point of view, remembering what happened. At times made it slightly difficult to visualise it, just because of the way it's told. But then in there are also what seems like extracts of the original documents, which I have actually read a couple. There are a couple online of confessions and third-party thoughts on what happened and some court records. So yeah, some of those have been incorporated into the narration. But yeah, I just found it really interesting to read about, especially because I was going between listening to the audiobook and also looking up the real stuff, which was why there came a point when I noticed what was happening in regards to the little extracts, and I was just like, oh, I'm pretty sure that's one of the real documents because I swear I read that online. So yeah, I just found it fascinating, and for somebody who likes a murder mystery but also really likes history, it was a nice amalgamation of the two for that historical fiction element. Yeah. If any of that makes any sense. Yeah, so Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood. Just full-on historical fiction with a murder mystery at the heart of it. Just completely fascinating, very interesting, and yeah, I'm just very, very interested to watch the TV series now. In the little comment underneath, it says it's the most captivating, disturbing and satisfying work since The Handmaid's Tale. To compare the two would definitely be quite interesting, considering the fact that The Handmaid's Tale is pure fiction. I say pure fiction because it was based on things that had happened in history to create the world of Gilead, but primarily it's fiction. Whereas this, it draws, well, it is real life, and then Margaret Atwood kind of just filled in the blanks. So yeah, I mean, to have read these books in school and to do that comparison, I kind of miss the days of just kind of like writing essays in a way, because I loved that thing of just like honing in, researching one thing and doing that compare and contrast. Is it weird that I kind of miss writing essays and just concentrating like that? So Alias Grace, Margaret Atwood, historical fiction. I found it very interesting and fascinating, and I did find myself looking up the actual events and finding out about the real person, not just the fictionalised version of her. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already, and then I will see you next time with another video. I love you all. Goodbye.